Alright guys, so we are now on to influencing government. This is basically our last portion into the American political system, at least as far as elections and how public opinion's formed. So the first thing obviously is public opinion. Public opinion plays a huge role in the influencing of government. It's one of the biggest drivers, if not the biggest driver, because the public is another word for, in many cases, voters. And voters are who drive those people in office, so public opinion has a very large impact on any individual candidate and therefore government itself. Alright, so first thing first, public opinion are the ideas and attitudes that most people hold about elected officials, candidates, government, or any major political issue. And it's a very broad topic, so there is lots of different subject matters you can get into, different people. But understand that on any given subject or elected official or government, there is some level of public opinion, and it can be measured. They're not uniform. There's many shades of gray. It's very, very hard in this day and age to find somebody that is hard Republican on every single issue or hard Democrat on every single issue. There's always something where they're kind of like, I'm in the middle here, or I'm on the left here, I'm on the right here. It changes back and forth depending on who you're talking to and what the issue is. Most issues, however, are in that gray area. Alright, big influences are the backgrounds in people's life experiences. So if you were to sum up your total political view in life, it's going to involve a lot of your experiences. For younger people, their political background is almost exclusively related to how they're raised, in particular how their parents view different political issues and candidates. Chances are the biggest indicator of whether or not a 5-year-old child will grow up to be Republican or Democrat is if their parents are Republican and Democrat. It's a huge impact. So your experience, the people you surround yourself with, the people that you're born into, that kind of stuff all plays a huge role in developing your opinion. Alright, experts often describe opinion in terms of direction, intensity, and stability. So direction is whether or not is positive or negative. It's that binary choice. It's like, I like this, I'm against this. So it's that binary choice, and it's not very good for polling purposes because if you say you're against something, you don't know how against something you are. That's the intensity issue. That's the strength you hold for the opinion. One big issue for young people for a long time, the big issue of gay marriage, the rights of homosexuals. That's been going on since the 60s, guys. It's been around for a long time. But people had strong opinions about it. Nowadays, a lot of these issues, people would come up and say, what's your opinion on gay marriage? And they give their directional opinion, positive or negative, and then you find out, but they don't really care that much. They're not really that intense about it. And then finally, stability is how firmly people hold those views. How easily could they change their mind? What influences could change their mind quickly? So if you're and how do candidates use these things? Candidates tend to gravitate towards those issues where people feel most intense and those views are stable. Because if you're talking about directionality, you're going to be pro or against abortion. It's a big issue with a lot of intense feelings, and those feelings tend not to change very much over time. So it's a great issue to attach on. The same thing with tax law, or the same thing with high taxes versus low taxes, taxing the wealthy versus taxing the middle class, who should get taxed the most. All those things, they tend to invoke intense thought followed by stable thought. It doesn't change much over time. Election results are probably the most basic public poll. So if you're talking about public opinion, the easiest way to get some results for your public opinion is election results. You know who won, so you know at least the direction people went in. You might not be able to get that whole stability or intensity measurement out, but you definitely know who won that binary choice of candidate A versus candidate B. Public opinion polls are the second best way to do it. And now I say this today, but public opinion polls have, like this, especially this past election with Trump, have really kind of gotten messed up because none of them were right, or at least none of them were interpreted correctly. So they do exist. They are fairly accurate, but there's still a very large margin of error. So there's a plus or minus of 3 or 4 points, which could swing an election. The key issue with a public opinion poll is the questions have to be fair and, most importantly, unbiased. They can't be leading. You can't go, let's say it was Hillary and Trump again, you can't go, Hillary Clinton believes that we should all get along and peace on earth, blah, blah, whatever she thinks. Followed by Trump saying, I like war, blowing people is great, yada, yada, yada. Well, one sounds very angry and nasty, one sounds very happy-go-lucky and hippie-ish. People are going to gravitate towards that positive description. And then if you immediately ask after giving those two alternatives and say, who do you want to be president? You're going to go, oh, Hillary Clinton. That's not a fair poll question. And pollsters make a lot of money and get paid lots of money from various agencies and various companies to make fair, non-biased questions. And that's the key thing. Non-biased. They can't lead the person hearing the question to a certain result. They're meant to be very neutral in nature. All right, so this is a Gallup poll timeline. And if you look at it, this is the presidential approval rating from 1945 all the way to 1996. So we're talking about a fair length of time here. We're going from Truman all the way to Clinton. So you see these ups and downs. And if you were to go through this and look at a current event chart, and if you could actually see the year by year on this, you would notice, oh, hey, as time goes on, there's ups and downs. You can pretty much put these major upswings and downswings in terms of what's happening in current events. I mean, you can look at Eisenhower. He just got elected. The Interstate Highway Program, boom, he's really popular almost the entire time. Then you got Bush. Then you go have the first Iraq War with Desert Storm. He shoots down. You also have a downtime with Reagan. This is Iran-Contra and a big controversy, followed by Reagan, the attempted assassination of Reagan, which brings him back up. All those things involve major. Sorry, this is where Reagan gets shot right here and gets reelected. So don't misquote me there. Then you got Nixon. Nixon's the easy one because he's starting to get us out of the Vietnam War here, so he's good to go for a second. But this is Watergate. This is the Watergate scandal, just shooting him down the polls and making people not like him. So public opinion polling is great for tracking the progress of our elected officials as well as how they're approved of, liked, or disliked. Oh, so corny jokes. Let's go. Oh, Cookie and Doctor. Okay, why did the Cookie go to the doctor? Because he felt crummy. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear. Why did the pig get a good job at a restaurant? Because he was good at bacon. What does a guy with two left feet buy? Flip-flips. Isn't it annoying when sentences don't end the way you think they octopus? Why don't kleptomaniacs get puns? Because they take everything, literally. Bam. All right, we're done. All right, so now we're on to mass media. Mass media, we think typically of the news. That's how we most often associate media. We're talking about the media today. It's the news, Fox News, MSNBC, ABC, all the CNN, all those news agencies. Don't get too focused on that. Media is everything. We got social media today. We have YouTube. We have late night TV. We have late night talk shows. Anything that is projected to multiple people at once in a large capacity is mass media. So don't get fixated on this idea that the media is news, or you hear the term the mainstream media is just news. News is a big part of it. It's not all of it. But mass media serves as a huge way to influence politics because it forms a link between the people and elected officials. Because your average person can't go interview Donald Trump. But you know what? Sean Hannity, he's on the Fox News channel. He's got a better chance of actually getting an interview with Donald Trump. So because he kind of aligns with them politically. So they're going to get the interview and they can connect the individual more readily with the various people in office. Print media, newspapers, magazines, books, that's slowly dying. Although there is a place for it because there are print versions, but they're usually online. And that's how you get quick access. And then you have electronic media, which is radio, television, the internet, TV, all those things that we basically assume is just the media. When someone says the media nowadays, they're not thinking of magazines, or certainly not thinking of books. They're thinking of instant gratification, quick access to information. Now, even today, although it's slowly slipping away, television is the most important medium for politics because it reaches the most people. Now you could probably argue the internet is pushing that television top spot down one peg. So television is still up there. It's probably still number one, but in 10, 15 years, it probably won't be number one anymore. All right, the media has a huge influence power. The media chooses what to show us. We don't choose what the media shows us. So in many ways, the media acts as the kind of filter of what the government does. So let's say that the media wants to cover abortion issues. Because abortion issues, again, register high on that intensity scale. Intensity means if I'm a news station, I cover abortion, I'm going to get lots of viewers and make lots of money with advertising. So all of a sudden, as the media person, I'm going to cover an abortion issue to make money for my company. And now because I'm covering that issue so heavily, government is going to want to pay attention too because I'm riling the people up. That's the possible negative influence of mass media. And that's where you get into the juxtaposition between the media as an informing service, like a newspaper would be, or like that noble idea of a non-biased media, versus the idea of a media, especially the news stations, as a business that has to make a profit. If the most important thing, let's say, is taxes. Well, you know what? Taxes are kind of boring. They're hard to talk about. Not everybody really understands them. But you know what really gets people going? Again, the abortion issue. That's always the easy one because it's just such an intense feeling that's behind it one way or the other. Pro-life or pro-choice, yada, yada, yada. But the big thing is, do abortion rights, for or against, does that have a bigger impact on the world or on our world as Americans than the economic impact? For some people, the abortion issue is their whole world. I'll freely admit that. But for the most part, tax implications have a more direct impact on everybody, but guess what? Taxes are boring. Taxes are no fun to pay, and they're no fun to really talk about either. So guess what? If you're a news company, are you going to pick to talk about taxes for an hour, or do you want to talk about abortion for an hour? Which one's going to draw more attention? Which one's going to draw more viewership? The abortion issue. So therefore, what does the government start to take more seriously? The abortion issue. What do they start leaving behind, or at least not talking to us about? The tax issue. What issue is arguably more important to a whole society, taxes or abortion? Arguably, it could be taxes. So they might not be covering things the way we want them to, but they're covering things the way that we're training them to cover. So is it you run into this issue? Is it the news company that's being biased by not showing the things that we think are important, or are the people just being given what they want, and the side effect of that is government is not taking care of us on other major issues. So there is a back and forth on that, and there is honestly no right answer to it. So the final conclusion is they'll cover stories that they think will attract the largest audience because they're all about dollars and advertising. All right, now elected officials and the press need each other, and they often clash. Think Trump right now with the quote unquote fake news at CNN that he keeps referring to them as, often calling them very fake news. There are clashes. There were clashes between Obama and Fox News. There were clashes between MSNBC and George W. Bush. There are clashes between various news agencies and lower level senators and congressmen. Those clashes exist. We have an adversarial news ideal to news because their job is to investigate and expose corruption, things that benefit society. So there isn't it, but they are symbiotic in relation. If you're a politician, you want to get your message out, you have to go to the news and say, hey, I want to do a press conference. And they'll be like, well, what are you going to talk about? This, this, and this. And they might say, yeah, that's really boring. We're not doing that. We'll video it, but you're probably not going to get any playtime. Well, they also come out and say, well, how about if I talk about abortion first and then I talk about the tax stuff? Yeah, sure, go for it. Now we'll do it. The media acts as a filter, but they choose what to cover. At the same time, the government doesn't have to give the media access. There's no constitutional requirement. Donald Trump, if he wanted to, could close off every news agency and say, I'm not talking to anyone. I'm going to be a president behind closed doors. He probably wouldn't get reelected, but he could do that. It's his prerogative to do that. But they need each other. If he wants to stay in office, he's got to be kind of transparent, talk to people. The big issue here is citizens need information, and the government needs to protect national security. There's a big tension there. They're very famously back in the early 2000s, right after 9/11, that time period, there was basically terrorists were using back channels on the internet to communicate and talk about the various stuff. Well, a news company, like through an investigative journalist program, found out that these terrorists, hey, they're using this back channel to contact and set up like bombings and things like that. And before they ran the story, the government said, whoa, don't run this story. If you do, they won't use these back channels anymore, and we can't track what they're doing. We'll have to find them all over again. You'll set us back months and months and months, and it might cost lives. The news company said, all right, we'll give you a few days to get your stuff in order, but we're still running this story. And they did, because that's part of their job. Part of their job is to expose things, whether it's for the betterment of national security or not. Now, there are some instances where you can suspend the right of the press, but you have to show some major national security issue. There is something called FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act, where the news agencies and other various people, and citizens for that matter, can basically request documents from the government, and the government can come back and say, we understand you have the right to these, but right now, because of national security, we can't give them to you. And that's the response you might get from a Freedom of Information Act request. You also might get the documents. The media's other major purpose is to act as a watchdog, serve the public interest by exposing government misconduct. But what happens when one media outlet doesn't want to likes their government and doesn't want to expose the misconduct, or thinks let's say the owner of that media outlet shares an ideology with the president or some member of government, doesn't want to expose things and wants to keep things non-transparent to protect the guy they like. That's where you run into that whole issue of a biased media, and that's become an issue more and more as time has gone on. Journalists have begun focusing more on scandals in the officials' private lives, and that tends to actually drive people out of politics. There was a time period in history where the private lives of elected officials was just that, private. A politician having a mistress or an extramarital affair was going, oh, okay, all right, what's going on with the war? They wouldn't even worry about it. It wasn't a big deal. Same thing was in Europe. Like if you've seen the new documentary called The Crown, there was paparazzi, but they were kind of more honorable paparazzi. Nowadays, there's no honor among thieves nowadays. It's just that if they see a scandal or they smell one, they don't care if it's a public issue, a private issue, whatever. They're going to try to nail somebody on it because that means ratings, because we as Americans, we love scandals. Really worldwide, people love scandals. They just want to watch them and just salivate over them. The term you're looking for is schadenfreude, basically the joy in seeing the falling of others. It's a very negative human trait. All right, this is a quick list of age and use of various forms of mass media. You'll notice this. Go ahead and pause it here and make some initial observations about the chart. One big thing you're going to notice is internet use among old people is not terribly high. They're not big fans. So, but that is rapidly changing. I think this was done back in 2006. It's been 10 years. There's a whole lot of grandmas on Facebook and Twitter, like trying to talk to their grandkids and embarrassing them when they're doing a comment on there, and it's actually kind of hilarious. Or look at this nowadays, talking about things like newspaper. Young people don't like newspaper. Radio. Young people tend to like radio. Television. And I would say nowadays, if you were to include internet radio, I think it'd be higher, but I think that's still considered the internet category. Television, that's why it's still the big one. Everybody watches TV. Everybody. Across all age groups, we watch our television. Now, a lot of folks are turning away from traditional television and going towards things like streaming services. So that has a big impact. So you might not get the same amount of live information or the same late night stuff. You can choose what you want to watch when you want to watch it. So it has changed the nature of how we're exposed to different media and ideas and ideology. Now, here's the cool thing the government can do. Like I said, Trump can say, I'm not talking to anybody. Trump can also decide who they're going to talk to. The government has the power to also decide who gets access to the radio and television airwaves. The FCC, part of what they do is decide who gets to be a TV station. So there's a big conflict of interest right there. So the FCC is run by the executive branch. If the executive branch doesn't like one person's opinion, can the FCC say, yeah, we're not going to issue a permit? Technically, no, but that's a lot of power to wield. Who's going to stop them? The enforcement mechanism in the government is the executive branch. If the executive branch doesn't want to do something, in theory, they can just choose not to do it. But so far, that has not truly happened. And if you want to look up a cool topic, look up the term net neutrality. It's actually fairly interesting. If you want to take your own time about how media bias relates to net neutrality, it's pretty interesting. All right. Freedom of the press includes freedom from prior restraint. That means that the government can't sit there and say, you can't say this ahead of time. As in, they can't censor stuff before it's published unless it's under extraordinary circumstances. The FCC can penalize a station that violates rules, but it can't censor a broadcast. So let's say that there's an award show. It's live. There's no time delay on it. You're just talking. And all of a sudden, some celebrity drops the F-bomb. Well, boom. They can't censor that ahead of time. That would be unconstitutional. However, because dropping the F-bomb during midday television is obviously against the FCC rules, you can be fined for it, and they'll fine you tens of thousands of dollars for an F-bomb. Same thing here. Journalists can report what they want, even if it's unpopular or embarrassing to officials. That's going way, way back all the way to the John Peter Zenger story we talked about earlier. It all relates to this idea that freedom of press means freedom from prior restraint. The government can't act as a filter on the press. That is against our whole American belief in free press. All right, the next thing we need to talk about are interest groups. Interest groups are huge. They are probably one of the biggest influences on politics outside of the people, because these are the guys that still engage in politics even when the elections are over. Even when stuff is done, they're still doing what's called lobbying, trying to get people to change laws. All right, an interest group is just a group of people who share a point of view. It's an association. So that whole idea of the First Amendment of freedom of association, this is part of that. You associate with the group, and they use that power as their group to convince various people in government to change laws or work with their point of view. These groups can promote economic interests, professions, an ethnic group like the NAACP, or an age group like the AARP or ARP as they go by now, or other special causes, LGBTQ stuff, all that, all those special interests. So the NRA and the Second Amendment. The primary goal of every single interest group, I don't care what they say their goal is, this is their goal, is to influence government officials and public policy and use political action committees and lobbyists. Now, a lobbyist is a member of the not necessarily a member, he is a representative of the interest group who basically tries to go and influence lawmakers. And now there's special rules for lobbyists. Every state and the federal government have one where you have to register as a lobbyist. So you can't go in there and say, I'm a citizen who's really concerned about yada, yada, yada. And really you're a lobbyist, because that's considered it's almost like lying. They want their congressman to know they're talking to a lobbyist and not just to a concerned citizen. That way they can have a better understanding of where that person's coming from. It basically makes it more transparent, more open, and more honest. Interest groups also want to influence public opinion. So the NRA is always the best example, because they do a lot of advertising and they do a lot of public interest work, especially and lobbying work. So you will see commercials every now and then about the NRA, especially before a federal election, whether it's Congress, the President, or the Senate. You will see a lot of those advertisements from the NRA. Many target potential members by using subscriber or membership mailing lists. And the big reason why you like subscribers, mailing lists, and membership lists is because the more members, mailers, and subscribers you have, the more power that interest group has. One of the reasons why AARP just sends out membership cards right when that person turns 50 is because that means they get more members. They have more power, they have the ability to go to the government and say, hey, we have 60 million members. That's our voting group. You better listen to us. And it works. That scares the crap out of elected officials, because they're like, 60 million. That's a lot of people that I can either really make happy or totally tick off. And you don't want to tick off 60 million people, especially when they're old and ticked off already. All right, now propaganda. Propaganda is the way in which we advertise. Now, if you've had world history and you talk about propaganda, you've probably heard it in the context of Nazism. That's not the context we're using it in here. So understand, propaganda during that period of time took on a different shape. We're talking about more about American modern propaganda and what it looks like. And these are the various ways you'll see it. And during class, I'll assign you a quick assignment to give me examples of all these. The bandwagoning, that's where you go, well, they're sure to win, so you might as well just join up with them. During this past election with Hillary Clinton, the Green Party shaved off a lot of Clinton's votes because they had a lot of the same views. So there was a lot of bandwagon ads coming out saying, hey, Green Party people, come vote for us. Don't let us lose to Trump just because you want to have a protest vote. That came out. Name calling, also sometimes called ad hominem attacks, where you just kind of say they're an extremist. Well, you got to back that up. And usually in those commercials, they don't back it up. They just call them extreme, use a sound bite, and make the person look bad. Endorsements. A very famous one was the Coretta Scott King? I can't remember. It was Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece. Basically said, I'm endorsing Trump. That's a big endorsement, because that's a large voting block of people, African Americans, and somebody who kind of represents the interests of the NAACP, various other people, was endorsing Donald Trump, who was a Republican candidate. Stat cards. This is where what you'll see in a commercial is a bunch of flashing still pictures, maybe some videos that just show, hey, this candidate has done this for the environment, has done this for economics, has done this, that, and the other, basically just showing, almost giving them a legislative or government resume to show how great they are. Or they'll do the opposite. They'll say, this person's done this terrible stuff to the environment. This person has destroyed their local economy, and they'll do the negative aspect of it. It can go both ways. And then there's the glittering generality. Candidate B is the one who will bring us peace and prosperity. The better one, the glittering generality, make America great again. That's the most recent one. The other big one was hope, Obama. Change, Obama. The big thing about a glittering generality is nobody defines what it means. At no point did Trump ever say what make America great again means. At no point during Obama's election did he say what change meant. The idea behind these ads, and it's kind of nefarious when you think about it, is if I say change, if I say make America great again, the person hearing that is going to naturally assume it's the thing that they like, that they want. So you don't even have to really make your advertising targeted. It's just kind of a shotgun effect. It's like if I say change, everyone's going to think, yeah, change is good. In fact, they're going to change it the way I like it. And it's that natural human assumptive motive where you're going to say, I'm going to assume they mean what I'm thinking, when chances are they're not. The just plain folks. My parents were Irish immigrants who came over on the ferry boats in steerage cabins, and they worked their way up. That's where it comes from. Or my father's a preacher. My mother's a homemaker. She raised 8 kids. That's the just plain folks kind of argument. And then you got the transfer, always associating a patriotic image with a candidate, or in some cases associating a negative or non-patriotic image, almost like subliminal advertising, but not quite. One thing you'll see is like it would happen during the 2012 election was the gratuitous use of lapel pins that had the American flag on them. And you'll notice, and there's actually a great SNL skit, if you remind me, I'll show it to you, just making fun of these debates and how gigantic and stupid some of these lapel pins became, and they started looking really tacky. But nowadays, if you were to watch any politician on camera, there's a 99% chance they're going to have a little lapel pin right next to their tie with an American flag on it. So keep that in mind. Just keep an eye out for it. You're going to see it.